Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel, That Aussie Mum. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Suze, and for those of you who do know me, welcome on back to the channel. Yes, I know, my name is not Daniel, that is my husband's name. This is his mug. It is also my favorite mug. So if anyone's confused, that's the reason why. And as you can tell, it's a little bit chilly this morning. It is officially the 1st of June, so it is the first day of winter, and I decided it would be the perfect day to do a nice, cozy, comfy, what I read in May video today. So as you can see, I am all rugged up in my hoodie. It's actually not a real hoodie, it's a fake hoodie, but you know what? It's toasty, and that's right. I can't justify the price of a real hoodie. I'd rather spend it on books. So I've also just woken up. I have to go to school later on, so I'm a little bit tired, and one of my contact lenses is not working yet. So if I'm looking a little bit dazed, that'll be why. Also, I haven't finished my coffee yet, so this video could end up being pretty interesting, but that's how we roll here, right? I did get through 13 books, including an audiobook in May. Now that's not normal for me, but I did also have COVID. So I had 7 days of isolation, and I read a book a day while I was in isolation. So those books are included in this video, but I'm gonna skip over them fairly quickly because I already did a video about my 7 books in 7 days. If you want to have a more in-depth look at those particular books, I will leave a link up in the cards above, and as well as in the description box below. And as usual, I will also link all of the books that I read in May down below on Amazon, so if any of them tickle your fancy, you can go and pick them up. Without further ado, let's jump right on in to what I read in May. So the first book that I picked up in May was Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. Don't you just love the cover? It's so pretty. I really like it. Now, I wasn't sure if I was going to like this book, but in the end, I really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to the second book in the series. And it is a YA, so my daughter did enjoy it, and she cannot wait for the second one either. But it is a fun read. It is about a girl who, I don't want to give too much away, but it is about a girl who thinks she's so deeply in love with this boy, and he is about to marry someone else, and she believes that he has been tricked into it, or he's been forced into it, or he's been cursed, and so therefore he's doing this. And so she goes to this magical being called a fate, who, the Prince of Hearts, who she is hoping will help her to stop the wedding. And he does, he stops the wedding, but not in a way that she expected it to go. Basically, it's one of those things where you've got to be careful what you wish for, because you've got to be very specific about what you wish for, basically. And it follows her journey through the upheaval that this all causes. And she finds herself this hero in the end, even though deep down she knows that she caused it in the end. She caused it in the beginning. And she ends up being chosen to go to her past mother's country to attend the ball for a prince living in this other country, for him to find a bride. And it follows her story there. There's a whole bunch of betrayal, there's a whole bunch of angst, there's a whole bunch of political intrigue, but not too much political intrigue because it is YA. But it was really sweet, and I really loved it. It was cute, and this will definitely get you out of a reading slump. The second book I read in May was The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan, and oh my goodness, I actually loved this book, and I cannot wait for the second one. I know some people found it a bit, it doesn't match the cover. Like, there's this main character sitting on the cover here, and you think the story to be from his perspective, but it's actually not. It's from the perspective of his young apprentice, except she's 19 when the story happens, but she's actually narrating the story from when she's a lot older. And she does a lot of silly things when she's 19, and as she's older, while she's narrating it, she can kind of laugh at herself and all the dumb stuff that she did. And I actually really liked the point of view, and I actually really came to care deeply for a lot of the characters that were in this book. I really, really enjoyed it. But basically the premise of it is the whole idea of one person being accuser, justice, and executioner, and having all that power in their hands, and the way that people want to change that. Like, is it a good thing to have all of the power to be able to accuse someone and then judge them and then execute them all by yourself? You know, it's an interesting justice system instead of using a jury. And I think the whole point of the story is to prove that this is not a good idea, that the spread of power should be spread around. And overall, I really thought that it showed that really, really well in the character of Sir Conrad. So Conrad shows this really, really well in his character. It almost seems like a descension into madness because his power isn't standing. Very interesting. Again, lots of political intrigue. Definitely a adult fantasy. Not a huge amount of magic and stuff in it. There is some, but it's more focused on the politics, and it's more focused on the whole theme of should one person hold all power, and on the characters themselves. Now the third book, this is where I get into where I had COVID and I actually had my 7 books in 7 days. That is linked up in the cards up above here. The first book I read then was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I'm not going to go into detail on these because, again, like I said, there's a whole video, but Book Lovers by Emily Henry, it is a cute, cheeky romance novel. Very fun, it's not super deep, not deep thinking. It's a good beach read, as beach reads seem to be the thing that's coming out because it's summer in the US. So books that you could read in a day, really nice and easy to read, and will probably get you out of a reading slump. It was cute, I enjoyed it, and I highly recommend Emily Henry if you want to read some more cutesy little romance books. The next book I read was Six of Crows. I absolutely loved Six of Crows, and I quite enjoy Leigh Bardugo's writing. I have not read Shadow and Bone yet, but I want to read that as well, and I've got Crooked Kingdom lined up for the next book of hers to read. Six of Crows follows a bunch of misfits who have to pull off this impossible heist. Very Ocean's 11-ish, and the characters are just, I love the characters in this one. I love it. And I love seeing how they get themselves out of the situations that they put themselves into. I gave this a 5 stars. It is supposedly a YA because the characters are quite young, and I did feel like they made some decisions that a person that young usually wouldn't make, but then they're also living in they live in the Grishaverse. It's a fantasy land and in a fantasy era where young people probably made more decisions like that in the past than we expect them to make currently. The next book I read was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. As you will have seen in my previous video, if you watched it, I did not enjoy this book at all. I hated the character of Evelyn Hugo. I didn't feel she redeemed herself at all. She did some awful things, and honestly, I wanted to DNF this book so badly, but I thought, no, I've started, I'm gonna finish, maybe it'll get better. And for me personally, it did not get better. But this is based on a woman called Evelyn Hugo, who is an actress, and all of the things that she had to go through and all of the things that she did to get to where she wanted to be, starting in the 1950s all the way through to modern day times. And very unpopular opinion is mine. I didn't like it. TikTok recommended it. TikTok failed on me this time. I know plenty of people love it, so I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, you'll hate this book, because a lot of people love this book. But personally, we are allowed to have personal opinions on YouTube, funnily enough. I did not like this book. And that's all I have to say about that particular one. If you want to hear more of a rant, go and watch my other video, 7 books in 7 days. The next book was The Chase by Candice Fox, and it is a thriller. And basically in this story, 600 prisoners escape this high security, maximum security prison, including prisoners on death row. And one of the prisoners on death row, John Cradle, is adamant that he did not kill his family, that he does not deserve to be on death row, and he uses the escape to go and find the actual killer of his family. And the other character that you follow is a warden who was the captain of the wardens in death row. She hates John Cradle, and you find out later on in the story why she hates him so much. And she starts off trying to stop him and find him and bring him back, and in the end ends up helping him bring about the finding of who the actual killer was. Again, a very gripping read, and if you want to know more about it, go watch the other video. The next book I read was another TikTok sensation, and that was The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Cute, cheeky, cringy love story. Not an enemies to lovers like Book Lovers was, but more of a, we're going to fake date so people think that we are dating so we can achieve this, and this, and the fake dating ends up being real love in the end. Lots of miscommunication, which leads to lots of cringy moments, and I really enjoyed it. Not as much as I thought it was going to be. It did not live up to the hype of TikTok, but you know, what book really does live up to the hype? So that's why I don't generally pick up books that are hyped too much, because I worry I won't enjoy them as much. It was fun. It'll get you out of a slump. Nice quick read. Beach read if you're in the US at the moment and it's summer and not freezing like it is here at the moment. The next book I read was, I feel like I'm saying, the next book I read was Edgedancer by Brandon Sanderson. Hang on. Got pins and needles in my foot. Ouch. Also, my throat's getting dry. And my books are falling down. Oh no. Okay. Excuse me 1 second. Got to libate my parched throat. Better. So, Edgedancer by Brandon Sanderson. I adore Brandon Sanderson. I love his writing so much. I will read anything that he writes, basically. Yeah. So, Edgedancer follows a young girl called Lift, who is basically an edge dancer. And if you've read any of the Stormlight archives, you'll know what the Radiants are. If not, Radiants are people with powers. They can draw their power from Stormlight. You really need to read it to kind of understand the gist of the whole Stormlight powers thing. Anyway, it follows this girl Lift, who has not really been spoken about much in Way of Kings. She's been spoken about, I think she gets 1 chapter in Words of Radiance. This is her own book. It is a novella. It is still an 80,000 word novella, which makes it the same size as some of the full-length novels that I read. But it follows her story, and it gives you a little bit more insight into who she is and how she could possibly fit into the next couple of books in the series. Next, I read The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwall. This is the basis for the Netflix series, obviously called The Last Kingdom. There are many, many, many books in the series. I've only read the first one. It reads more like a historical retelling than a narrative, even though it is a narrative, but it's very to the point and not very emotional. And it's not lyrical at all. It's not poetic. It's not a beautiful fancy writing style or anything like that. It's to the point. This is what happened. It's very much based on the facts of the story and less on, there's some emotion in it, but I reckon it could have gone deeper into the emotion of the characters, but it didn't. I still enjoyed it though, and I will pick up the next few, but it does follow the character Uhtred, son of Uhtred, who was born English and then his father died in battle and he was taken on as a slave to the Danes, all set in Britain at the time in the 800s. And he ends up being adopted by the Danes, and he fights for the Danes against the English. And when he gets older, he ends up going and swapping sides and fighting with the English and King Alfred against the Danes. And it goes through all his story there. It goes through, some of it is based on fact, and you've got some factual characters in there like King Alfred, and then most of the characters are fictional, and it kind of follows the actual history of the Danes invading Britain once the Anglo-Saxons had settled in Britain after booting out the Britons. The Book of Whispers by Kimberly Starr. I've had this sitting on my shelf. You can actually tell by how yellowed it is. I've had this sitting on my shelf for years, and I read about a third of it and I DNF'd it at that point. It is meant to be young adult, but I found it sort of bordered on young adult and adult more so. It's not purely young adult. The characters are young, yes, they're like 16, 17, 18, 19. You follow them over a couple of years, so they go from being young adults to being more than young adults. That doesn't even make sense. They go from being in their teens to going into their 20s in this particular story. And it follows a boy called Luca, and he is the son of a count in Italy. And basically it is following the Crusades to Jerusalem, the Italian Crusades to Jerusalem, and the English and all the other Crusaders join them along the way, and it follows their journey from Tuscany all the way to Constantinople and then down to Jerusalem. But it's from two perspectives. The first perspective is from the boy Luca. He was not meant to go on this. He was meant to stay on his father's vineyard and run the vineyard because he was the only heir to all of everything his father had amassed. And he tricks his father into letting him go along on the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And his father, before they go, gives him this book called the Book of Whispers. And no one can seem to read it. There's some Latin in the book, but it's in a language that no one can read. And the other thing about this boy is he sees demons. Before he gets the book, they're kind of just shadowy figures. They don't really, he doesn't see them all, but once he sees the book, it opens his eyes and he can actually see every single demon in the place. And these demons are all attached to specific things, to relics or whatever. And he's already had to have an exorcism because the last thing they want is for him to be seeing demons. They see that as a bad thing. And so he goes on this trek with his father and his cousin, who's an awful, awful brat of a person. And all the while he can see demons, and he's got to try and hide this from everybody. The second perspective is a girl called Susan, and she has grown up in a convent in Cappadocia, an underground convent. She's grown up in there. She was born there. Her mother lives there. Her mother doesn't speak. Her tongue has been cut out. And you don't really find out why until a fair bit later, and I don't want to spoil it. But her mother's tongue has been cut out. And so she uses a language where she draws on her daughter's hands these letters. So that's how she speaks to her daughter. So Susan can speak, but she has spent her whole time pretending that she can't speak for fear of her tongue being cut out as well. And she eventually escapes this convent and meets up with Luca. And they travel together in this pilgrimage. There are wars. There are all these awful, awful things that happen. And all of the time, they're trying to figure out what the demons are trying to do through this Book of Whispers. Even though I did enjoy it in the end, I was still like, come on, are we done yet? Are we done yet? Like, it's really well written, but I found it dragged a little bit. Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. So this is something that I've been wanting to read for a little while. I've had a lot of mixed reviews on Ariadne. I think I enjoyed it. I'm not entirely sure yet. I found at the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, it's insta-love. What is this? Oh, I don't like this. And then later on I realized, duh, I'm just being an idiot. It's not insta-love because all the twists and turns. But Ariadne follows a Greek woman called Ariadne, and she is the granddaughter of the sun god. And her father is Minos. And Minos is a very powerful man on the island of Crete. He is the king, but he displeased the god Poseidon. So Poseidon put a curse on Minos's wife, and to basically I'm trying to figure out how to say this without it sounding awful. It's awful what they did, but basically to have a baby with a bull. Okay, anyway, very awful. And so Ariadne's mother ends up having this baby, and it is a man bull. It is the Minotaur. So Ariadne's brother is the fabled Minotaur, and he is an awful individual who gets locked up in his labyrinth. We all know the story of the Minotaur in the labyrinth. So the Minotaur is Ariadne's brother, and she tried to care for him, but there was nothing that she could do. So what this king of Crete, Minos, does, there's more to the story. It's really complex, actually. These mythology retellings are really complex. Ariadne's other brother was a champion athlete, and he went to Athens to compete and ended up being gored by, of all things, a bull. Duh. And he died. And so Minos blamed Athens and decided that for his vengeance, he was going to take 14 young people, 7 men, 7 women, as tribute from Athens every year to feed to the Minotaur in the labyrinth. What an awful... I really hope these people weren't real. I mean, I know it's a mythological retelling, but what is wrong with these people? What is wrong with these people? They're awful. They're awful. Anyway, so about 3 years into all of these tributes coming, the Prince of Athens, Theseus, actually decides to join the tributes. And his plan is to obviously kill the Minotaur and steal all the power from Minos of Crete. And Ariadne falls madly in love with him. This is where the insta-love came out. And he apparently falls madly in love with her. And this mild-mannered young lady helps him to kill the Minotaur and to escape. And she thinks that she is going to become his queen in Athens after all this. And I don't want to go into more detail because I'll wreck the story. But suffice it to say, there is betrayal galore in this book. The other point of view that you see a fair bit in here is Ariadne's sister, Pasiphae. Pasiphae is Ariadne's much younger sister, and she is the opposite of Ariadne in every way. Ariadne is meek and mild and sweet, and Pasiphae is headstrong and strong-willed, and she goes for what she wants for. She goes for what she wants. She goes for what she wants. This book messed with my head. Anyway, so you're looking at the two perspectives, and I don't want to go into any more detail because I don't want to wreck it. It's complex, and it's bizarre, and the Greek myths, if you look at the Greek myths into more detail, you just see how absolutely bizarre and weird they really truly are. I didn't think I was going to like this. I did like it. I'm not sure if I liked it enough to go and read the next book, which is Electra. I don't know, maybe I will, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have a read of Ariadne and have your mind blown with all the weirdness and awfulness that was Greek mythology. The Beautiful by Renee Adhieh. I don't know how to say her name, so if anyone could tell me how to say her last name. Renee Adhieh. I don't know. I'm so sorry butchering that name. But she's written a series, and this one is called The Beautiful. It's the first in the series, and it's set in 1872 in New Orleans, where the city is ruled by vampires. Except it doesn't explicitly say that they're vampires until much later in the story. And you're following this character called Celine Rousseau from Paris, who is running away from Paris because of something that she did there. And she ends up living in a convent in New Orleans while she is trying to get herself on her feet. And she's made a best friend there named Pippa, who is from England, and who she also has an interesting backstory, just you don't really hear much about it. And the story follows Celine as she tries to make a place for herself as a seamstress or a tailor in New Orleans. And she comes across this boy who basically runs New Orleans almost like the mafia style. And I say boy because they're only 17, so it is young adult. The characters are quite young, but it's got that angsty enemies to lovers kind of vibe to it. There's a lot of mystery involved. It's a bit of a murder mystery. There's all of these women are turning up dead, and they're trying to pin it. The culprit is trying to pin it on this boy and his gang, basically. And then the police officer the police detective that is trying to solve all of these murders falls in love with Celine as well. So it's kind of like a love triangle going on, as you know, a lot of young adult books seem to like having as a young adult, a love triangle. I'm really good at reviewing books, am I not? No, I am not, but I love them, so that's why I do it. Anyway, so she is nearly killed, and there's a whole big twist at the end, and I really enjoyed it, and I think you should read it. And I'm really bad at these reviews. Maybe I should just read what's on the back. Maybe that would make them sound better. I don't know. The very last book that I read was through Audible, and that was The King's Assassin by Robin Hobb. I've been listening to the Farseer trilogy on Audible just to see if I really liked it, and I will be listening to Assassin's Quest in June. I like to have at least one audiobook on the go while I'm reading, because I read until I'm tired and then I close the book and then I listen until I'm just about falling asleep so I can get more in there. I love having a story in my head all the time. I'm obsessed. So I did read The King's Assassin, and it follows again the boy Fitzchivalry, who was the King in Waiting's bastard, except now that he is grown up a bit more, he's become quite a good assassin, but he's also become a threat to one of the princes who wants to be the king. And it follows his story trying to stop this prince named Regal from ascending to the throne. And I love the magic system in this one. It talks about the wit and the skill. The wit being able to communicate with animals on a mental and spiritual level, but it can be quite dangerous because you can become that animal, you can lose yourself. And if you are found to have the wit, generally you will be hanged over water and then chopped up and burnt because you are cursed. The skill, however, you use to talk to other people all through your mind. And you can also damage a person's mind if you know how to use the skill properly. And Fitzchivalry has both. So he's got to be careful not to lose himself with his wit, and he's got to keep the wit quiet so he doesn't get, murdered. But he can also skill, and he thinks he's not a good skill person, but he's actually really, really good. And a lot of the book is all of these other skilled people who are against him trying to get into his brain, basically, and glean information from him to try and turn him into a traitor, because Prince Regal really, really hates him and sees him as a threat to the crown. So it follows that story. And I'm not going to go more into detail with it. Again, I don't want to wreck it for anyone who hasn't read Robin Hobb. I've come to Robin Hobb really, really late in life, but I really, really, really love her writing. The guy who reads the audiobooks at first really annoyed me with his accent and and whatnot, but I've gotten used to it now, and I think if anyone else was to read her stuff, it would sound weird. Well, that's it. That is my cozy comfy May wrap up for the month. 13 books down, very happy with that. Keep an eye out for my next video. It will be my pop list, my pile of possibilities for June. As I said before, I don't like having a TBR. I don't like being fixed in. I like a bit of flexibility. So I will choose more books than I could possibly read for my pop list and choose from there. Again, I have linked all of those books in the description down below so that you can go and purchase any if any of them has tickled your fancy. They are affiliate links to Amazon, so they do help me out if you use them. Please go ahead and use them. It doesn't hurt you at all to use them. And give this video a thumbs up. Click subscribe down below if you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments, of all of the books that I read in May, which ones have you read and enjoyed the most? Also, feel free to put in any book recommendations that I can put into my pop list for my next video. I'll see you next time. Bye.